The city is drowned in rain. A black Mercedes slides through iron gates. In the back seat, Serena Vale sits in silence, one hand pressed to her ribs, the other trembling in her lap, while the father beside her does not even pretend to love her anymore. Then the doors open. Warm amber light spills across marble floors. A fire burns low in a room too elegant for cruelty, and near it stands Adrian Russo, the man whispered about in fear, the man Serena expects to become her executioner. But the camera does not linger on his power. It lingers on the moment his eyes land on the bruise beneath her cheekbone and harden. One sentence changes everything. Did he do that? From there, the story becomes a tragedy, sharpened into revenge, where every glance is a threat, every silence a verdict, and every step forward leads a daughter closer to the public destruction of the father who buried her alive.
Observe the tragic design of Serena Vale's life, a soul appraised as a ledger entry long before she was seen as human. Bartered as collateral for a father's debt, she faces the wolf, Adrian Russo. But the frame shifts. Tonight, his eyes hunt for a survivor, not a trophy. Russo sees the Grace her father spent years trying to kill. This isn't a story of her end, but a ghost finally taking shape. Stay as the tension peaks. Share your city in the comments. I want to know where these echoes land. Outside, rain falls like heavy black ink. Inside the Mercedes, every breath is a visceral reminder of her father's malice. She watches neon lights bleed across the glass, wishing to vanish from this dimension. If she could merge with that glow, she might escape the purple blossoms of trauma and the dark shadow beside her. Gregory Vale offered no harbor, only cold directives. He barks orders to mask the evidence of his fists without even looking at her, treating her agony as a minor glitch in his schedule. She touches her throbbing jaw, feeling the heavy heartbeat of a private, localized disaster. He demands she stay mute and keep her head bowed, handling her like a cargo shipment nearing the dock. When she begs for one shred of mercy, his eyes remain frozen. He is no longer a father. He is a merchant discarding an exhausting, broken piece of inventory. That abandonment was a clean, psychological break. In that heartbeat, she was reclassified as someone else's debt. They descend into the obsidian heart of a manor where Adrian Russo's whisper is law. This man is the ghost architect of the city's most terrifying and shadow-bound empire. We are peeking into a void where names vanish and debts are paid in plasma. Gregory, the city's so-called moral pillar, is bartering his daughter's flesh to keep his fortune afloat. A hollow patriarch selling a shattered girl to balance a book, masquerading his betrayal as rational commerce. Serena waits for the steel of a dungeon, but the lens changes. The gates reveal a temple of glass and black stone, glowing like a dying star. It is a fortress built on secrets, stretching through the midnight like a fever dream pulled from a forgotten, tragic era. Wealth bleeds from every surface, chilled marble and haunting statues. Standing in the gale, her silk gown feels like a funeral shroud. She shivers, knowing the man meant to shield her has instead dressed her as a sacrificial lamb for a god of the deep underground. She played the part, wearing his expensive armor only because the alternative was death. As they enter, the butler's eyes hold either pity or a deep disgust for her father. He gives the nod. The king is ready to inspect his latest, most delicate piece of property. This house is a crypt for expensive dead things, heavy and overpriced. They walk through halls of silent art until they reach the throne room of this power. Behind those iron-thick doors sits the man who now holds the literal leash to her pulse and her future. There is no grand entrance, just the soft click of a lock. Adrian Russo is no beast from a storybook. He sits like a nocturnal deity, swirling amber whiskey by the fire. He is all sharp edges and custom silk, a predator perfectly at home in this den of luxury. He is younger and more beautiful than the nightmares promised. Perhaps 35, with eyes that could shatter glass. When he speaks, his voice is a low, lethal melody. He notes their delay with a calm that is far more terrifying than a scream of rage ever could be. He pins her with a gaze that carries the weight of a mountain. While her father tries to pitch her like a product, Adrian drops a blade of truth. He recounts every minute of the 3 weeks Gregory spent crawling and begging, reducing the pillar to a pathetic servant. He moves toward her, smelling of dark tobacco and expensive spice. He lists her father's moral sins one by one, towering over her until she can't find the air to breathe. This is the moment the deal stops being a concept and becomes a terrifying physical reality. Her father tries to haggle over her worth, but Adrian cuts him off. She is a human, not an asset. He asks her age, 23, and then commands her to meet his gaze, forcing her to confront her own change in the mirror of his cold eyes. In his stare, there is no hunger, only a surgeon's focus on her wounds. He tracks the shadows on her face and the scars on her skin. Then, he asks the one question the world ignored. Was it him? Did he do this to you? The earth stops spinning. For the first time, the cruelty hidden behind her father's name is exposed. Under the crushing gravity of Russo's focus, her truth spills out in a broken whisper. The air thickens, turning cold and electric like the seconds before a fatal strike. Without raising his voice, Adrian orders her father out. The contract has changed, and the man who sold his child has no place here. Gregory tries to speak, but Adrian's aura chokes the words in his throat, forcing a panicked, shameful retreat into the night. The boom of the closing door signals either freedom or a new cage. Serena stands in the hollow silence, discarded by blood and left with the city's darkest shadow. Her father didn't even bother to look back as he abandoned her for the final time. He tells her to sit, his voice lacking any expected cruelty. As the logs pop and the rain batters the glass, he simply watches her. There is no threat in his posture. Instead, he honors her trauma with a heavy, blunt truth. You are hurting. The internal wall collapses, and she spills her secrets. She tells him of the broken ribs and the constant terror of her father's hand. Adrian listens with a stillness that is more haunting than any scream. He is a quiet witness to the wreckage of her soul. He calls for a doctor immediately, valuing her healing over her obedience. Serena's mind reels because this isn't how a sale is supposed to go. He isn't acting like a master. He's acting like a guardian. We are watching the entire script be rewritten in real time. She finally asks the question, why hasn't he taken what he paid for? Adrian looks at her with a tiredness that seems ancient. It's clear now, he isn't a collector of broken spirits. He has nothing in common with the monster who raised her. He explains that he never uses people as currency. Ever. Her father made a deadly mistake, fueled by his own greed. For Adrian, the deal is dead, and a new purpose, keeping her alive, begins under the shadow of his total protection. He promises her a fortress, food, sleep, and a doctor's care. When she admits she has nowhere to go, he makes it clear. He will never let her return to the man who broke her. The doors to her past have been welded shut forever. He sees through the mask of men like Gregory, the ones who call domestic violence discipline. He knows the scent of a predator instantly, and he is determined that such rot will never find a home within his walls. As the doctor enters, the room shifts from a prison to a sanctuary. Adrian pulls back, leaving her to the kindness she has been starved of for 23 years, while the midnight storm washes the filth from the world outside. You are safe for now, darling, Adrian says before leaving. He promises to stay near if she falters. Silence fills the room, leaving Serena with a doctor whose warmth feels alien. She drops her guard, mapping her pain. But the check of her broken ribs brings a blinding torment. Nothing is totally shattered, Dr. Chen says, a steady anchor. The bruising is bad, but you will live. Serena doesn't feel like a survivor. She feels like trash. The doctor gives medicine, treats her face, and wraps her chest. She speaks of the hard recovery ahead. The massive room turns cold, lit only by the dying fire and the rain crying against the glass. Time blurs into shadows until the door creaks. It isn't Adrian. A young woman in black introduces herself as Elena. "Let me show you your suite," she says softly. Serena whispers, "A room? For me?" With nowhere left to turn, Serena trails her through shadows of polished stone. A heavy door swings wide, unveiling a chamber so opulent it mocks her past. Ivory silk spills over a massive bed framed by midnight windows and a bathroom carved from amber-lit marble. "Clothes are ready," Elena says, eyes lingering on Serena's bloodied rags. "Better than those ruins. Use the water if you hunger. Dial 0 on the rotary." Serena's voice is a ghost. "Why be kind?" Elena's face softens, a flicker of genuine pity crossing her features. Elena speaks of a soul pushed to forget its own name. She claims Russo is no storybook monster, just a man haunted by his own specters. "Sleep," she whispers. "Tomorrow is a different play." As the latch clicks, Serena strokes the cool marble, grounding herself in this impossible reality. The bed is a cloud of weightless velvet. The closet, a museum of silk she once only saw through glass. In the deep stone tub, she could drown her sorrows. But the mirror is a nightmare. Her bruised face is a constellation of violet and black, a map of her own tragedy. Her face is a broken map, her eyes two empty craters where hope used to live. She is a stranger to herself. In the steam, the water scalds her skin, a desperate ritual to wash away the filth. Swallowed by an oversized shirt, she buries herself under the blankets, praying to vanish. Sleep is a ghost she cannot catch. In the dark, her thoughts are a dissonant orchestra. The truth stings. Her father traded her soul for a debt. Yet Russo, the supposed wolf, is the only one who didn't bite. He has become an accidental savior in a world of monsters. She bolts the door, a weak prayer against a broken world. Only when the sky turns a bruised gray does her body finally give up. A heavy knock breaks the silence, a summons from the master. When she stands, the fire in her ribs reminds her of every blow she survived. She moves through the halls with a slow, tragic elegance, hiding her pain in folds of fabric. The scent of dark coffee leads her to a vast industrial kitchen. Adrian sits there like a silent god at a stone altar, his eyes flicking between a screen and his steaming mug. His eyes are a dark curtain, unreadable as he asks of her wounds. Shadow-like in the doorway, she confesses her body is broken, but her soul is finally awake. He points to a feast meant for kings, served by a maid who disappears like a fading dream. She eats like a starving animal, every bite a tether to the living. This bread is the first proof she hasn't died. When she's done, Adrian pushes a coffee toward her, his gaze locking on hers. He puts his phone away. The real interrogation is about to begin. She grips the mug like a drowning woman. He asks when the nightmare started. 14, she whispers, after my mother died. With her shield gone, she was the only target left. Adrian's face turns to cold stone, his jaw setting with a slow, dangerous intensity. He asks the dark question if he touched her that way. She shakes her head fast, a desperate no. It was just fists and broken glass. To Adrian, that is the only grace in this tragedy. She admits the house was her cage. Nobody ever saw her bleed. Good grades and silence were her mask. The veil name kept the world away. Adrian lets out a low, predatory growl. Big names are just bigger targets to him. He needs every ugly detail. He's measuring the rot before he cuts it out with a surgeon's precision. Her father is a ghost builder, his world held together by lies and unpaid bills. Now, the storm is here. He threw her to the wolves to save himself, but the gamble failed. When she asks what happens to him, Russo's voice is cold. His future is a dark question mark. The man is finished, Adrian says, but how far he falls is up to you. He hands her the power. What do you want his end to look like? Serena freezes. For 21 years, she was the violin. Now he's asking her to lead the entire orchestra. He looks at her as if she finally matters. When she can't answer, he gives her the gift of time. This house is your fortress, he declares. Just exist here. Breathe. They'll talk about the future once the smoke in her mind finally clears. Am I truly free? She asks. His eyes burn with truth. The gates are open. You are a guest, never a prisoner. Her father's reign is over, turned to ash. You hold the pen now, he says, leaving her in the sun with the first spark of hope. A week passes like a dream. She wanders the mansion, a ghost in silk. She is an honored guest, yet a refugee of war. In this palace, served by men like Marcus, she realizes her comfort is paid for with the currency of her own past suffering. Adrian is a shadow, busy with dark business, yet he leaves small traces of kindness behind. They live in the quiet spaces between words. Finally, the weight of his unasked-for mercy breaks her. In the stillness of the night, she goes to find the truth behind his eyes. The library is her church, smelling of old leather and secrets. She climbs ladders to the stars while Adrian hunches over his desk like a focused god. She buries herself in a massive chair, staring at a book, but her heart is miles away from the printed word. Tell me the truth, she demands. He tries to dodge with a smooth lie, but she pushes. Why save a girl who is worth nothing? Adrian stops. He closes his book with a heavy thud and turns, his entire being locking onto her with a terrifying magnetic weight. He tells her of a boy of 17 who watched his father sell his sister to pay a gambling debt. She was brilliant, a scholar, but to him she was just a stack of chips. His voice is flat, yet the pain underneath is a jagged, unhealed wound. She came back a shell, and 2 years later, she chose the silence of the grave. Their father never cared, dying eventually in his own filth. Adrian's knuckles turn white as he grips his chair, the only sign of the hurricane screaming inside his chest. As for the man who broke her, Russo made sure he never breathed again. He built a criminal empire just to fund a slow, cold revenge. Serena doesn't run. Instead, she weeps for the boy who killed his own soul to become a weapon of justice. Don't think I'm a hero, Adrian rasps, his voice like gravel and silk. His kingdom is built on a graveyard. There is no light in his blood. He gives her a smile like a winter sunrise, bright and beautiful, but completely freezing to the touch. He calls himself a man of darkness, but says her father's rot made him sick. Seeing her thrown away like trash was the spark. This save, he admits, might just be his own twisted way of begging for forgiveness for a sister he couldn't save. Serena shuts her book as the air grows heavy. Adrian describes the systematic death of her father's name. While Gregory begged for his life, Adrian sent a pack of legal wolves to tear his world apart, piece by bloody piece, until only dust remained. The truth is a stomach-turning horror. He lists the crimes, stolen charity funds, cheated families, all while playing the saint. For 20 years, Gregory Vale was a parasite in a suit, draining the life from everyone who was foolish enough to trust his smile. You were his cash-out plan, Adrian says, his eyes cutting like glass. He reveals a $2 million insurance policy on her head. Her death was his payday. Every bruise she took was just a rehearsal for the moment he planned to erase her forever. He tried to win twice, sell her to a beast, and pray she died for the payout. But Adrian didn't play along. Now her father is rotting in a cage of his own making, unable to touch the money while she stands safe in Russo's shadow. Adrian draws the iron curtain, strangling every avenue of escape. He presents the ledger of vengeance for her appraisal. The ultimatum is binary: slip into the shadows of destitution or burn his name into history as a permanent monument to human depravity. She tastes the salt of forgotten summers, hiding welts beneath heavy lace while trembling at his shadow. To him, she was never flesh and blood, merely a faulty ledger entry to be erased. His remembered stare acts like acid, dissolving her peace of mind with clinical cruelty. She embraces the blinding exposure of fact. A lethal curve marks Adrienne's mouth as they architect a command hub for his downfall. Over 14 days, they dissect the cracks in her father's soul, composing a dark masterpiece of total institutional collapse. Time dissolves, stripping away their masks until only the raw truth of midnight remains. He admits the crushing price of his autonomy. Meanwhile, she weeps for the ghosts of the girl who almost drowned in her father's absolute shadow. He shifts from protector to professor of treachery, decoding the anatomy of a lie. He reframes her trauma, commanding her to weaponize her panic. She must use her dread as a grinding stone, forging a will that can never be shattered. Mid-lesson, he spots a flicker of resilience that endeared the hollow void of her youth. He insists her endurance isn't weakness, but proof of a metal core that her father, for all his pilfered power, could never dream of forging. Serena deflects the blow, her form mimicking his brutal grace. "I am shattering," she gasps between strained breaths. He does not slow. Strength isn't avoiding pain, it's the silent rebellion of standing after every strike. They toil until her chest heaves, but the spiritual anchor finally begins to lift. She finds him amidst the scent of peat and the gloom of the library. "What is the countdown?" she asks. He lifts his head, eyes burning with a hunter's intent through his fatigue. 7 days. They plan to crown him a martyr at the gala. It is the perfect stage to dissect his rotting reputation. "I am going with you," Serena asserts, her tone unyielding. Adrian weighs her determination. "I must watch his house of cards incinerate," she insists. He gives a heavy nod. "Understood. But you follow my lead. You stay in my wake. I will stage this so your safety is non-negotiable." What happens when the dust clears? Adrienne stands, probing her future. Her reply is already tempered in the forge of her past. "I want to be the harbor I never had. I will build a home for the lost, where the shattered can finally taste a peace that doesn't feel like a threat." "We will build that foundation as one," he promises. This is no sweet sentiment, but a blood oath between two scarred spirits chasing a cure. That evening, her demons are muted, and she slips into a sleep that tastes for once like true freedom. The hall is a hothouse of expensive fabric and forced smiles. Men in $5,000 tailoring play their parts in this gilded farce with mechanical precision. Gregory Vale anchors this lie, soaking in praise, sown in fields of betrayal and the silence of his victims. He exudes a god complex, certain his sins are entombed under heaps of bullion. He fails to notice her. Serena haunts the doorway in deep indigo, a sovereign of the kingdom Adrienne built. Her trauma is hidden beneath a sophisticated veneer of absolute power. Do we pull the trigger? Adrian murmurs. She answers with a curt nod. As they enter, the oxygen leaves the room. Every eye tracks Adrian, the shark in silk, before freezing on the ghost of the girl they thought dead, now standing tall. The elite facade starts to tear. Gregory's flute of bubbles shakes as his skin pales to gray. He sees a wraith returned for vengeance. As he stumbles toward them, Adrian's palm is a steady anchor on her spine. Keep your focus, he breathes. Let his panic bloom. Watch him sink into the knowledge of his own end. They glide through the crowd like a brewing hurricane. Adrian paraded her before the oligarchs as Serena stared back with icy, diamond-sharp focus. She was no longer a footnote in his story. She was the designer of his doom, rising from the very spot he tried to bury her. Irony chokes the air as the elite drink to Gregory's fake charity. They laud his virtue while he feels the invisible rope of his lies constrict his throat. Serena observes his mental collapse until Adrian's hand tightens on hers, the unspoken cue for the slaughter to begin. Sudden blackness kills the glamour. Behind a quaking Gregory, the screen flares with an electronic death warrant. This is a cold autopsy of his sins, the $2 million bounty on his child's head, and every forged deed are displayed for his peers to condemn. A vacuum of sound grips the ballroom. Gregory's features twist into a grotesque mask as he hunts for a friend, meeting only the glacial judgment of the room. The thief who spent 20 years stealing lives now stands naked, his armor of wealth stripped away by the harsh glare of truth. Gregory Vale! The shout cracks the silence like a gunshot. Blue and gold swarm the hall, led by a detective with a winner's grin. You are being detained for grand theft and the attempted murder of your own daughter. The crystal sanctuary he built explodes into a cloud of lethal shards. Cuffed and broken, his eyes spit venomous hate. You treacherous leech, he snarls, his inner rot fully visible. Serena is unmoved. I am not treacherous, she replies, her words as sharp as a razor. I am just done playing the sacrificial lamb in your scripted nightmare. The party collapses into a riot of strobe lights and fleeing guests. Adrian guards her through the debris, a human shield until they reach the car. They speed away as the skyline dissolves into a ghost of the past she is finally allowed to burn. As the estate gates slam shut, her nerves finally slacken. The spiritual chains of her youth snap and fall. It is finished, she murmurs to Adrian. You saved my soul. He gives a slow negative. You took your own liberty, Serena. I just made sure you didn't have to die for it. A ghost of a smile appears as he tucks a hair behind her ear, his touch surprisingly tender in the dim cabin. What is the new mission? He asks. The words are old, but the air between them has changed. Serena looks back at him. Now, we build a life that is indestructible. The road ahead is littered with wreckage and vultures of the press. Yet she has walked through the furnace and come out as hardened steel. The quivering girl in the closet is dead. She is Serena Vale, and she has officially resigned from his tragedy. This is only the opening scene. By sunrise, the media storm breaks. Her screens are a flood of digital noise, viral hashtags, and the prying eyes of the world. Healing in the quiet of her room, she watches the public feast on her private scars as if they were entertainment. The giants of the boardroom fall. Gregory Vale is caged in iron as his empire of lies dissolves. The story changes. Headlines scream of his depravity, paired with a shot of Serena and Adrian, a new lethal partnership. She is spent, but her gaze is that of a woman steering her own fate. Elena enters with a tray and a report. The jackals of the press have surrounded the house. 15 camera teams are dug in. The guards are holding the line, despite a hack reporter trying to scale the wall for a shot of the wreckage an hour ago. Over her morning cup, Serena asks where Adrian is. Elena says he has been dodging legal traps since 4 in the morning, acting as the wall between her and the world. He intends to keep her in the shade until she chooses the storm. He is taking the bullets so she won't have to. But Serena will not stay in the dark. She drinks slowly, knowing the time to strike back has come. She stares at the mirror and sees a new woman. Her bruises are turning to amber, but the real change is deep within her marrow. The discovery of the steel in her soul, a fresh spark caught in her eyes. She found Adrian in his inner sanctum, barking sharp commands into his phone with the cold precision of a field marshal. At her entrance, he cut the call, his focus narrowing like a hunter scenting a fight. He looked like a razor blade wrapped in high-end tailoring. He gave a curt apology for his team's clumsy damage control. When Serena mocked his lack of finesse, he admitted his tools were far more brutal. He asked if she was holding together. She told him she had survived deeper scars. Then he slid a massive dossier across the mahogany like a death sentence. This was the 72-hour countdown to her father's ruin. It was a cold tally of fraud and lies that left Gregory no room to move. His lawyers were just ghosts wandering through a graveyard. Adrian had not just built a cage, he had welded the door shut and burned the plans. The legal jargon was a sterile mask for the truth. Her father was being erased from the world. Adrian did not lie about the press at the gates. They were there for the blood. "Decide," he whispered. "Do we let them devour you, or do we seize the narrative together?" He proposed a single, raw interview with Sarah Chen. No theatrics, just the clinical facts. He reminded her she owed the world nothing, yet her voice would be the final stone on her father's chest. Serena closed the file, the heavy silence echoing the words she had yet to speak. She weighed the safety of her silence against a world ready to cast her as a victim or a pawn. She was finished letting others write her history. "Make the call," she said. She would give them the interview, but the stage would be hers alone. Adrian responded with a slow, approving nod. The estate would be their fortress from the meeting. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by a phone. It was Detective Morris, the man who put Gregory in a cell. Adrian hit the speaker, and the room grew heavy with the weight of an impending storm. The tension was a physical pressure. Morris sounded like a man drowning in the filth of the streets. The news was bad. Gregory's legal team was using his charity image to buy his freedom by 2 o'clock. They were making a desperate play to get the wolf back into the shadows of the city. Adrian's face froze into a mask of unyielding stone. Morris reported that the defense was spinning a sick tale, claiming Adrian had used Serena to kill a rival. It was a transparent lie, yet Gregory still had powerful ghosts in high places pulling the strings of the law. The detective needed a terminal blow, a revelation so dark it would strip away Gregory's humanity. Adrian turned to Serena, yielding the floor. She realized then that the insurance policy was her ultimate weapon. It was not about money, it was a death warrant, signed in her father's hand. But Morris needed a pulse, not just paper. A policy could be argued away by clever sharks. They needed the raw proof of his malice. Serena closed her eyes, descending into the cold architecture of her memory, searching for the moment her father's predatory soul was laid bare. She remembered the winter in his voice, when he stopped seeing her as a person. 6 weeks ago, through a haze of amber scotch, he had mused that every life has a market price, usually paid at the grave. He had dismissed her existence with the bored indifference of a clerk balancing a ledger. Morris demanded every jagged detail. Steeling herself, Serena echoed the patriarch's dark gospel. that even trash has value and some lives are worth more dead than alive. To the detective, that was the final nail. The old man had finally talked himself into a grave. The confession was just the opening act. Morris needed the digital bones of the plot. As Adrian's team tore through the electronic remains of Gregory's life, the clock ticked toward the 2 o'clock hearing. If they tripped now, the predator would be back on the hunt by sundown. Watching his lethal efficiency, Serena found herself drawn to his shadow. Adrian warned her that this path led to the witness stand, where legal wolves would try to tear her story apart. It would be a public execution, yet she did not flinch. She was ready for the blood. She welcomed the vultures of the press gathering outside. No longer content to be a ghost in his machine, she watched as Adrian's team dug up the digital rot. By midday, they had unearthed something far more diseased than any of them had dared to imagine. The data was a map of a soul's decay, bribes to advisors, and orders sent to a fixer named Jay regarding a nuisance. By 1:30, Morris's voice crackled with the energy of a man who had finally driven his spear into the heart of the beast. The tide had turned. The judge had entombed Gregory, slamming the door on his bail. To seal his fate, the feds had broken his muscle, a man named Jimmy Roar. Now Jimmy was singing like a canary to keep himself from being buried in his own cage. Roar laid out the mechanics. A 50% deposit for a mechanical failure, a clean kill with no fingerprints. As Adrian listened to the price of her life, his grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles were the color of bleached bone. The silence was suffocating. If Adrian had not stepped in that night, Serena would have been a chalk outline and a file number. She retreated to her room, the world spinning off its axis. The thought of a father trading his daughter's life like a failing stock was a cold that settled in her marrow. She fought for air until Adrian's hand anchored her to the earth. He watched her with a hunter's instinct, offering his own silence as a shield. When she tried to fix her face into a lie, he gently broke the mask, giving her the rare sovereignty to simply fall apart. Her voice broke as she whispered the unthinkable. The man who built her had tried to dismantle her. Adrian gave her a cold autopsy of Gregory's mind, explaining that she was never a child, only a variable. In that moment, her grief turned into a sharp, lethal resentment. The time for mourning ghosts was over. She was not crying for a father, but for the empty space where one should have stood. In the heavy stillness, she found a new, jagged rhythm, thanking her guardian for seeing the woman beneath the wreckage of the girl. He waved off the thanks, but she demanded the truth. He could have walked away from the blast zone, yet he chose the burden. He finally admitted it. He knew the agony of watching someone you love shatter while you stood by, helpless and screaming inside. In her eyes, he saw the ghost of his sister, a memory that made turning away impossible. Serena asked if she was just his way of balancing the scales, but he confessed the story had become something far more visceral. 3 days later, Sarah Chen arrived at the gates. They met in the library, a fortress of dust and ink. Adrian stood at the edge of the room like a silent stone gargoyle as the questioning began. Serena started to map out the ruins of her youth, ready for the world to dissect every syllable of her survival. Sarah's questions cut through the gossip, seeking the marrow of the trauma. The room turned clinical as she asked when the hit became real. Serena's voice was hollow. She always knew he was a predator, but she never expected to be his designated prey. To order the death of your own blood is a special kind of depravity. The public myth of Gregory Vale was a beautiful fiction, a golden statue built over a mass grave. The man the world worshipped was nothing but a shimmering ghost of the monster he truly was. Beneath the saintly mask was a shark that ruined lives with bureaucratic indifference. Serena demanded her truth rise above the media noise. When asked about Adrian, she refused to let them paint him as the man pulling her strings. She was no pawn in a corporate game. Adrian had pulled her from the debris with no bill attached, providing both a sanctuary and a forge to sharpen her blade. She would not be a footnote in his revenge. She was the architect of her own salvation. She called herself a survivor who found a bastion in the heart of the storm. When asked about the future, Serena admitted the pages were still blank, but her purpose was clear. She would burn down the webs that still trapped others like her. She wanted a legacy of substance, not shadows. After the journalists left, Adrian poured 2 fingers of neat whiskey. As Serena sank into the chair, she felt the suffocating weight of her history finally begin to dissolve into the air. He praised her poise, noting that the truth is a heavier burden than any tactical victory. They circled the unspoken thing between them, a question hanging like smoke in the room. For now, the lack of a name was the only truth they possessed. He described them as 2 broken things navigating the dark without a map. It was not a promise of love, but it was the solid ground she needed. Yet that fragile piece was shattered exactly 7 days later. The wheels of the law began to grind. As Gregory's empire bled secrets, his followers fled like rats from a sinking ship. His name became a curse, his money frozen. Meanwhile, Serena began to forge her body into the very blade her father had tried to break. A fragile balance takes root between calculating minds. Evenings are for whispered truths in the dark. A magnetic gravity pulls them close, a tension they fear to name. Tonight, the air finally sparks. She finds him on the balcony, his cigarette glowing like a dying star. A small vice for the crushing pressure. Below, lawyers bargain, trading secrets for an old man's freedom. They trade truth for mercy. Adrian finds the deal revolting. He exhales defiance into the night, vowing no escape. If the laws fail, infamy will be his eternal sentence. His lethal tone brings Serena a strange peace. She asks if she is just a collection of fractured glass. He turns, eyes burning. She is not shattering. She is being forged. He calls her rage an engine, not a defect. He used that same fire to survive after losing his sister. That anger is the iron for their future weapon. Turning wrath into a crusade is his only gospel. He became the fortress he lacked, shielding the weak from the wolves. A gray path, but his chosen purpose. He is no saint, yet he refuses to be a bystander. Serena drowns in his golden gaze, surrounded by tobacco and power. She whispers thanks for rewriting her tragic end. He brushes off the praise. She saved herself. In the slow-motion pulse of the room, his hand finds hers. They cross a line they can no longer ignore. Their kiss is a map of a world without terror. The low hum of his voice promises safety. For once, the ground beneath her feet feels like solid stone. Words fail this bond. It is not a romance, but an alliance of shipwrecked souls. They stand amidst the ruins, defined by the strength it took to remain. In her room, she deconstructs the myth. Where others see a wolf, she sees the survivor. Monsters are often just victims who grew tired of being prey. She imagines a life of rebuilding, sunlight replacing the dark. Then the morning breaks. A roar of violence erupts from below, shattering the quiet like a gunshot. She finds a new devil in the office, 60 years old, tailored suit, shark's teeth. He snarls a warning at Adrian. A deadlier chapter of the war has begun. Gregory's men have long memories and sharp knives. Adrian stands like a frozen monument. When Vincent speaks her name, the room's air turns toxic and cold. Vincent sneers at Adrian's domestic life, mocking the waitress. Serena steps into the light, weary of being a ghost. Her presence halts the hostility like a blow. Vincent's gaze is predatory. Serena refuses to be property, asserting her identity as a survivor. Adrian introduces the man with the flat, grim tone of final warning. Adrian cuts the ties with surgical coldness. Vincent stares at Serena, naming the price. Blood for her father's fall. She answers with a single quiet word of defiance. Shame isn't enough, Serena argues. Vincent laughs, seeing only a sacrificial lamb. He warns of coming wolves. Adrian finally snaps, ordering the man into the night. With a hollow brotherhood, Vincent casts Serena as marked prey. He fades into the shadows, a ticking clock of violence. Serena stands in the wake, visibly trembling. Terror washes over her. She is a walking target. Adrian offers the bleak truth. Her father's ghosts are hungry for blood now that the money has vanished. The vultures need a scapegoat for their ruin. The storm was already gathering before she arrived. Serena wasn't just a guest. She was the final, fatal spark. Looking at the shadows, she feels like a liability. Adrian's mask falls. The situation is catastrophic. Every bridge behind them is currently in flames. Treachery whispers in his ranks while Vincent waits to strike. The truth hits with blunt force. Yet she prefers this jagged reality to a soft, fabricated lie. Adrian ignores the world's judgment. To him, she is a soul worth the fight, not a pawn. He'll stay by her side, even if the city burns. A purposeful touch seals their bond. New resolve hardens in her chest. If the monsters are coming, erasing her won't be as easy as they imagined. A knock shatters the silence. Marcus, stone-faced, announces Detective Morris's arrival. Fate has finally come to the door, and it isn't here to talk. At the prison, Gregory Vale barely outran his own grave. A seasoned blade found his ribs. Adrian knows the hit was a betrayal choreographed from within. An anonymous donor paid to silence Vale. The message is chillingly clear. They won't stop until every last trace of the Vale bloodline is scorched away. Iron bars are a joke against $1 million bounty. Now the law eyes them both. They are being framed as the masters behind the prison hit. The public screams for blood. The district attorney wants a trophy. Morris knows Adrian's mind, but the optics are fatal. The world wants a spectacle. The defense plays the victim card, claiming a vendetta. Adrian offers his logs, but Morris warns of the dark. Real killers move where the law cannot reach. The detective leaves. Serena spirals. Her father's lifetime of sin has finally matured. The bill is being presented at the most precarious hour possible. Adrian begs her to breathe, though the air feels like lead. He claims the truth will protect them, but the pressure is pushing the walls inward. While the law plays its game, Adrian hunts the money. A cryptic call pulls him away. Serena is left alone in the mansion's vast, hollow silence. The mansion's weight presses in. In the library, her mind is a choir of terrors. The very walls that once offered safety now feel like a cage. Vincent's poison lingers until Elena arrives. Serena spills the horror, the prison blood, the police pressure. The burden is simply too massive to hold alone. Elena sees the crosshairs on Serena. She reminds her that Adrian's home is a fortress. Despite the threats, she is standing in the only safe harbor. Elena sneers at Vincent, a mere scavenger. 8 years at Adrian's side taught her one thing. Under pressure, he does not break. He becomes a blade. He is no saint, but his devotion is absolute. Serena fears her love will be his undoing. Elena counters, in their world, love is a burden he chose. They turn to the rhythm of the kitchen, chopping, grounding, breathing, a momentary peace in the work. Then Elena asks the one question that truly cuts. Elena pried into the girl's psyche, peeling back the legal armor in Adrian's heavy gravity to find a raw truth. Serena's voice was a fragile confession. She hungered for the eclipse of her father's shadow to finally end. She demanded a reckoning that could bleach the stains of her haunted lineage. She craved a life lived in the blinding, honest light, far from the cold existence of the hunted. After years of drifting like a ghost, the sudden weight of becoming human again felt crushing. It was a brutal, shivering rebirth into a world that finally felt real. Was this a soul's true anchor, or just the phantom ache of a shared wound? Elena's voice was low, suggesting that such tangled passions were worth the blood they cost. Then Marcus broke the frame, his silhouette sharp against the light. Adrian was summoning them for a crisis in the dark. They found Adrian in his private theater of power, flanked by 3 shadows carved from stone. The atmosphere hummed with the electric static of impending violence. Though Adrian tried to shield her from the fire, Serena refused to be a spectator to her own destruction. Tony, a man whose eyes were maps of 1,000 tragedies, delivered the cold verdict. A death warrant for her father had been inked 48 hours ago. The hidden gears of the underworld were already turning, grinding toward a final bloody conclusion. $500,000 for a clean hit, $1 million for a tragedy staged as an accident. The strings were pulled by Marco, a hollow man dancing for the Castellano family. Serena felt a cold shiver at the clinical price tag placed on her father's pulse. Marco's agenda was to erase the man before he could sing to the feds. The $20 million lost in the fraud had ignited a fever of absolute bloodlust. In their violent theater, a dead witness was the only performance that guaranteed a curtain call without a conviction. The darkness deepened as they realized Marco was mapping her soul with predatory intent. He had logged her dreams and her footsteps with the precision of a ghost. He wasn't merely a hunter. He was a silent voyeur watching the rhythm of her life. A suffocating isolation descended upon her. Adrian demanded she remain entombed within the fortress walls. To step outside would require a private legion just to keep her breathing. The mansion had officially transformed into a gilded, high-security bunker for her protection. Adrian shifted into a lethal focus, tightening the perimeter while choreographing a clash with Marco. Despite the tremors of Serena's panic, Adrian remained an ocean of stillness. He spoke of the coming carnage as if it were a simple negotiation of territory and blood. In their circle, you either find a common tongue or you find a grave. Adrian sought to choke the conflict before the first shell hit the floor. It was a desperate, elegant dance balanced precariously between a handshake and a massacre. Adrian made it clear that a failure to strike now would harvest a field of casualties. He stepped into her personal orbit, his voice a low, singular vow. Any hand raised against Serena would be met with the boss's absolute, unholy fury. He was walking the razor's edge between a signed treaty and a funeral procession. Serena finally saw the jagged reality of his world. The gold and the shadows were nothing more than pawns in a terminal game of life and death. She fought to stand beside him, but Adrian's refusal was a sharp blade. He would descend into the pit alone to settle the accounts. There was no room for negotiation. He vanished into the midnight air without a single look back. Any further protest died in her throat. Adrian vanished at 8 in the evening with his most lethal shadows in tow. Serena was left drowning in a mental storm, while Elena offered tea and hollow comforts that couldn't dull the edge of the blade. Elena whispered a jagged truth about their shared reality. This world was a predator's playground. You either had the fire to survive the heat, or you were reduced to ash. Serena sipped her honeyed tea, her heart heavy with the cold weight of dread. Elena asked the final, devastating question. Could Serena truly love a man who lived on a cliff's edge? She warned that Adrian was already lost in his devotion to her. He was falling toward her with a dangerous terminal velocity. The path remained binary. Flee into the void or be flattened by the weight of his throne. Serena was caught between the warmth of his touch and the nightmare of his enemies. Every road ahead seemed to end in a violent, inevitable reckoning. 120 minutes of silence passed before a mechanical roar announced his return. Adrian emerged, mended in body, but looking utterly hollowed by the night's work. Seeking a brief escape from the ghost, he drowned his fatigue in a heavy pour of amber spirits. The blood pact is sealed. Marco retracts the hit on their lives, while Adrian agrees to forget decades of laundered sins. This is the soul of a criminal truce, a cold, fragile peace bought with mutual silence and non-aggression. Yet a grimmer realization took hold. Marco suggested that a swift execution would have been an act of mercy. The legal flaying awaiting her father promised a slow, clinical dismantling that would make a bullet look like a blessing. Gregory Vale was destined to rot within 4 walls of cold steel, his grand legacy reduced to a punchline. Serena remained a statue of apathy, wishing only for his slow, silent decay. Her heart had finally hardened into a diamond of resolve. Hate is a slow-acting venom, a truth Adrian carried in his marrow. In the deep shadows, these 2 broken pieces found a desperate, jagged sanctuary, trying to stay afloat in a sea of blood and inherited trauma. Adrian stripped away the mask, demanding a final moment of clarity. He asked if she stayed by choice or if she was just hiding from her own burning house. He needed the raw, unvarnished truth, stripped of all performance and pretense. He offered a rare, vulnerable glimpse into his soul, confessing a devotion that went too deep. By laying his life on the table, he dared her to reveal if her love was a living thing or just a scripted part of the tragedy. Having watched her stand firm while their world turned to glass, he now looked for his own future in her eyes. It was a tectonic shift for a man who had once lived only for the next heartbeat and the next kill. Serena was haunted by the ghosts of the underworld, yet she chose this chaos over a hollow, safe life. To her, an existence away from Adrian's violent orbit would be a story without a soul, a film with no light. Their bond had morphed into something far more powerful than a simple debt. It had become an undeniable, heavy gravity. Though the words were hard to find, her devotion to the man beside her was now total and absolute. A long, silent embrace marked their passage into the unknown. They had burned the bridges to safety. They were now a single front against a world that was beginning to feel the heat of their defiance. They stood ready for the storm of the coming trial. As her father's kingdom turned to dust, she found a strange, paradoxical peace. She was protected by a man who was, in his very essence, a lethal weapon. Staying alive was their only measure of victory. As the cold October winds signaled a shift in the air, Serena entered the halls of power looking like a queen, her navy suit serving as modern, impenetrable armor. With Adrian guiding the machine and Marcus acting as a silent ghost, they pierced through a pack of starving journalists. Serena prepared to walk through the fire, fueled by a single white-hot desire for a final accounting. Outside, the air vibrated with the scream of camera flashes and ghoulish questions about her father's end. Inside the courtroom, however, the world went cold, filled with a heavy, clinical silence that tasted like judgment. Linda, the lead prosecutor, offered a cold, strategic anchor. She warned that the defense would try to tear Serena's mind apart, urging her to be a statue of fact and let the truth act as a crushing weight. The gallery was a dark collection of the broken and the damned. There sat Gregory Vale, no longer a king of industry, but a shriveled ghost draped in the neon insult of an orange prison jumpsuit. Her father's face had turned to gray ash, his eyes a flickering mix of rage and deep, primal terror. As the judge took the bench, the air in the room grew heavy with the electric charge of a coming storm. The charges were a long, rotting list of moral decay. Systemic theft, grand larceny, and the attempted murder of his own daughter. The defense? a shark in a suit, prepared to spin a web of lies and shadows. This fallen architect of greed pretended to be a victim of the shadows, painting Serena as a girl lost in a fever dream. While Gregory tried to play the martyr, Serena found her balance in Adrian's steady presence amidst a dry rain of financial data. The technical jargon was numbing, yet the jury's boredom turned to a slow-burning fury as the human cost was tallied. The theft of retirement dreams and the gutting of charities revealed the true, predatory heart of Gregory's empire. A deep, echoing sadness filled the chamber with every victim's story. Gregory remained a pillar of arrogance, whispering venom to his lawyer. During the recess, Serena wondered if he knew his throne was now just a pile of dust. Adrian found her in a pocket of silence, urging her to find her breath again. Shaking under the weight of the misery her father had sown, she realized Gregory hadn't just stolen money. He had systematically murdered the futures of thousands. She confessed that her own spirit was buried among his many victims. The legal tide shifted, calling for her testimony to strike while the emotion was hot. Adrian, her shield and partner, offered her an exit if the darkness felt too heavy. Refusing to run, Serena rose to face her monster. She climbed the stand and took an oath on a book that meant nothing to her, ready to dig up 24 years of poisoned family blood. The lead actress finally found her voice. As the opening formalities fade, the lens of the inquiry shifts to her childhood. Serena paints a haunting portrait. Gregory was merely a biological contributor, his spark of humanity having died with her mother when she was only 14. He became a master of psychological warfare. Serena learned to exist as a shadow, knowing that a single, misplaced breath could ignite his volatile rage. At 16, a simple laundry mistake ended with her being hurled against a plaster wall. That strike resulted in a catastrophic brain injury, which he waved off to the surgeons as a clumsy household slip. Over the defense's frantic cries, the prosecutor unrolls a map of her trauma, a tragic list of every bone he snapped. She narrates her past like a slow burn, psychological horror, her voice steady and chillingly detached as the jury watches in horror. Then, the cinematic twist. Gregory had secretly placed a $2 million bounty on her life via insurance. To her, that policy was a signed death warrant. Every previous beating had been a mere dress rehearsal for the day he would finally cash in on her corpse. No legal maneuver can erase the stain of his depravity from the record now. She recounts his drunken rants, specifically one 6 weeks before the hit. He had laughed with a jagged, psychotic edge, sneering that even human refuse has a price tag, and that people are far more lucrative in a casket. A suffocating silence grips the room. Chilling even the most cynical observers, Serena realizes she was never a daughter to him, just a liquid asset. As Linda sits, the defense shark, Porter, approaches with a predatory, serrated grin. Porter attempts to frame her agony as a choreographed performance, his voice dripping with mock concern. He begins to chip away at the foundation of her memory, trying to sell the jury a version of reality where she is the liar. He tries to weaponize her history, but Serena counters with the precision of a fencer. She explains that therapy for her mother's death was armor, not a weakness. Her pills weren't madness, they were survival tools in a house of blood. The cross-examination turns to gaslighting, painting his rage as the burden of a father with a difficult child. When he brings up her hospitalization at 17, she reveals the truth. She had tried to die just to escape him. Porter sneers, labeling her a bitter failure looking for a target to blame. He suggests she's found a new pack of wolves to hide with, but Serena meets his gaze with the frozen, lethal stillness of a winter storm. The lawyer mocks her story as a convenient fable timed to his client's bankruptcy. Serena strikes back, declaring that 9 years of systematic destruction and a literal price on her head isn't a script. It is the cage she was built in. Porter scoffs at the empty witness stand, calling her medical records nothing more than a girl's desperate cries for a spotlight. He looms over her, his shadow stretching across the stand in a final attempt to break her spirit. He paints her as a girl, lost in the maze of her own broken mind. But as Serena looks at the monster in the orange jumpsuit, the hierarchy shifts. She is no longer the prey. She is the one holding the gavel. She turns to the jury with a final, piercing clarity. For a decade, her father tore her identity apart piece by piece. When she was no longer useful, he put a $2 million bounty on her soul to fund his escape. She asserts that no amount of legal theater can hide the physical evidence of his cruelty. Porter's mask finally shatters. When he claims he isn't the enemy, she exposes his strategy of blaming the victim. Her fear has turned to ice. The leaden silence in the courtroom confirms Porter has lost his audience. His defense is a pile of ash on the floor. Linda keeps her redirect brief, letting the gravity of Serena's words sink into the jurors' minds like stones. When asked why she spoke, Serena says she is reclaiming a history that was stolen. She stands for every soul he ever crushed, proving that truth is a light that cannot be buried. She leaves the stand with a victor's grace. Her legs finally begin to give way as she steps down, but Adrian's hand is there instantly to ground her. Through the rush of adrenaline, she whispers that her goal was the total annihilation of his legacy. It is a moment of pure triumph. The prosecution rests, leaving the defense's narrative feeling like a hollow echo. Then, as Tuesday's light cuts across the room, the architect of all this misery takes the stand to deliver his final, desperate deception. Serena watches him perform a masterclass in manufactured grief. He plays the roles of the tragic widower and the drowning debtor, even squeezing out a tear for the child he broke. It is a cinematic display of pure malice. But Linda Hartwell prepares the blade. She slams down medical files from Serena's 16th year, proof of a shattered skull. She asks if this clumsy accident was merely the first draft of his grand betrayal. Gregory snarls, branding his own blood as a drama queen who sought her own agony. He dares to claim she hurt herself. But Linda exposes the truth. He was living in luxury while his daughter withered away in the dark. "A devoted father indeed," Linda remarks with icy sarcasm. She pivots to the $2 million policy signed just before the violence. The jury no longer sees a man, they see a predator who stalked his own kin. The evidence is a mountain. This man viewed his own child not as a soul, but as a financial exit strategy. His own digital files show a father calculating her heartbeat in terms of debt-to-equity ratios. His composure finally breaks as he rants about high-stakes contracts worth $2 million. Linda remains unmoved. She pierces the noise with one question. Did he hire a professional to erase his own daughter from the world? The assassin is waiting to testify for $25,000. Gregory shrieks about a conspiracy, but the logic is a noose. Why would a man facing life lie for a stranger? The trap has snapped shut. The defense table falls into a graveyard of silence. Linda delivers the killing blow. He tried to balance his ledgers with his daughter's blood. The game is over. The predatory spark in his eyes finally goes dark. Linda begins a forensic dismantling of his soul, reducing the monster to a terrified rat in a corner. Her closing statement isn't just an argument. It feels like a slow-motion moral execution. The defense's efforts were a pathetic, hollow joke. For 6 agonizing hours, Serena drifts in a void of pure dread, tethered to reality only by the weight of Adrian's hand holding hers. He is the only solid ground left in her world. At 4:30, the clock strikes judgment. As the verdict approaches, her heart beats against the walls of her chest like a trapped, frantic bird. The jurors' faces are carved from granite. Fraud proven. Grand larceny confirmed. Then the central horror, attempted murder. Guilty. The house of cards finally collapses into the dust. The room explodes into chaos. Amidst the shouting and camera flashes, Gregory's infantile rage is silenced by the gavel's final strike. For Serena, the long, frozen winter of her life has finally reached its end. The sun sets on his freedom forever. 40 years for his greed, and life without parole for the blood he sought. It is a cold, mathematical justice. Serena's emotional gates finally break wide open. Gregory Vale is now a man destined to rot in a concrete box. He tries to catch her eye one last time, but guards drag him away like trash. Serena searches her soul and finds only a beautiful, liberating silence. Outside, the media vultures are waiting. With steady breaths, Serena addresses the world, exposing the hollow shell of the man who once ruled her. She describes a father who treated a human life like common currency. His crimes were not just financial, they were a war on her very existence. But today, the truth is the only victor. She proves that trauma has an expiration date. Serena walks away into the new dawn. Once inside the car, she finally lets out the breath she's held for years. Adrian asks how she feels, but she is utterly empty. The mountain has been moved, but the effort has left her soul weary beyond words. Adrian whispers that learning how to exist again takes time. That evening, Serena lies in the darkness, the echoes of the courtroom still dancing in the hollow shadows of her mind. Victory tastes like ashes in her mouth. She finds Adrian in the midnight stillness of the library. The house is pregnant with a silence that feels heavier and more permanent than the noise of the trial. She asks him if his own vengeance ever made him whole. He admits it is just a final chapter, not a restoration. Despite her father's chains being gone, Serena still feels like a ghost haunting her own life. Adrian refuses to let her disappear, calling her a survivor instead of a victim. He tells her that healing is a jagged, broken journey, where some days the weight is too much, but moving forward is still winning. Serena finally exhales the legal filth. Her eyes drift toward a horizon that promises the terrifying grace of being normal. She offers exile to spare him her ghosts, but Adrian refuses the lie. He calls her the only dawn his dark world ever saw. A collision of souls. The world is fracturing, but he holds her tight. He vows to raise a citadel for the broken. One kiss, heavy with 1,000 blood oaths. No debt keeps her, only a raw hunger to stay. He is the iron foundation of her new world. Her breath is the only truth he needs. They sink into the now. Reconstruction starts at dawn, but tonight she breathes. The monster is a ghost. The nightmare has bled dry. Life demands blood and sweat. She finds a hollowed ribcage of steel by the water. To others it is trash. To Serena it is a twin. She sees a temple. He sees a graveyard. Yet Adrian's hand never leaves hers. If she envisions a home in the wreckage, he will build it. A corpse, he mutters. Like I was, she whispers. They buy the rot on a prayer. 4 months later, the ruin breathes again, a miracle in stone. Winter dies, taking the rot with it. Stone gates and greenery rise like a phoenix. The haunting chill of the old ruin is finally buried. They christen it Haven House. Serena commands the dust with a voice like iron, bending the light of the house toward a new sun. The design is medicine, healing floors below, 12 cloisters above. Serena raised every penny herself, trademarking her trauma for the rank of peacebringer. Vultures mocked her name, but her calloused hands silenced the room. Adrian and Marcus haul the physical weight of a dream made manifest. 1,000 sheets for a mountain of grace. With the elite circling and doors about to part, Adrian watches her pulse, steady and terrifying. 8 lives hang on her heartbeat. Adrian anchors her to the earth, vowing she may bend but never snap. Survival is her new kingdom. The victim is dead. The architect remains. As the witness from her trial pulls into the drive, Serena prepares to unveil her masterpiece of vengeance. Sarah's lens captures the truth, while Serena and Adrian move in a shared, silent rhythm of devotion and labor. Serena steps into the light of her own power, while Adrian stands as the shadow guardian, shielding her back for eternity. Adrian burns his dark inheritance to build a harbor where shattered hearts can finally find their missing pieces. A lord of the shadows reaches for the sun, finally understanding that a woman's peace is the only empire worth defending. This house is a monument to the fact that a single drop of mercy can drown an ocean of cruelty. Two broken things hum in the same key. Serena finally finds the words to name the fire she feels for him. 100 crates of struggle remain, but their intertwined fingers are a knot that no storm can ever loosen. Doors open. Serena stands in the center of the storm, leaning on the man who walked through hell just to hold her hand. She has no degrees, only the scars of a doctorate in agony, turning her trauma into a sermon for the camera. The girl who was invisible is now the woman who sees everything, gathering the world's discarded souls under her wing. Haven House is a scream that breaks the silence, a hidden door for those buried alive by the world's indifference. Survival was just the first act. Now, as Serena reaches the summit, the world watches a soul being born from the ashes. 8 lives rest in her palms. She carries the crushing weight with a face of stone, hiding the fire burning within. When the world says no, this house says always. It is the final trench against the erasure of the human spirit. In a city of ghosts, she has paved a road of stone, forcing the world to look at the faces they once ignored. Under a blood-orange sky, she watches the clouds. A storm is coming next month, and she is ready to meet it. Adrian is her gravity. No matter how hard the wind screams, he is the weight that keeps her from flying apart. Loving is a battlefield when both soldiers are covered in old scars, a tragic dance of two hearts that forgot how to beat. Jackie collapses on the threshold, hunted by a man who breeds death. The stakes aren't just high, they are everything. Safety isn't sold here, it is breathed. A sacred right for those trying to remember their own names. Jackie is a ghost in her own skin, her mind a landscape of lies planted by a monster to rot her soul. Serena offers the cold truth. The lies are venom, and the antidote is a pain that will bring you to your knees. She is the foreman of hope, laying bricks of courage and measuring the mortar with the steady beat of her own survival. Maria, Tanya, and Lisa arrive, walking maps of suffering with stories etched in the hollows of their eyes. Small mercies bloom in the silence. For the first time, the halls echo with the terrifying, beautiful sound of a woman laughing. 21 days of war. Serena is a ghost of herself, and Adrian feels the air turn cold before the first tear falls. When a girl slips back into the dark, Serena's heart becomes its own judge, jury, and executioner. You are the gate, not the destination. They must walk through alone. Believing you are their savior is a beautiful, lethal lie. How many stayed? He asks. 11. 11 warriors still standing in the wreckage. He tells her to love the living, not the ghost. The summer solstice arrives, and the house finds its soul, guarded by the warriors she chose herself. She is hunting the city's wolves now, turning their power into nursery walls and quiet rooms. Mothers are reclaiming their names brick by brick. The shadow of the old Serena is gone. She is no longer a dream, but a monument. Adrian's chaotic fire has settled into a steady, clean burn. He is scrubbing the ghosts from his past, dismantling the villain he once was, while Serena watches this rebirth with a bated, hopeful breath. He is tempering his power into a shield, desperate to be the man she deserves. A thick July humidity hangs over the balcony, heavy with unspoken truths. What comes after this? Her voice breaks the quiet. He turns, his iris catching the last amber rays of the sun, and offers her a life. The future, he whispers, and every piece of us. Are you ready to stay? Her heart slams against her ribs like a trapped bird. He pulls out a velvet box, and inside a stone catches the silver moonlight, shimmering with a cold fire. Marry me, he says, his voice cracking with a raw, terrifying honesty. Not as my ward, but as my equal. Let's build a world together. The word wife hangs in the air, a ghost from a childhood she buried long ago. Safety was a debt she could never pay. But this man had walked through the fire beside her without flinching. He had seen the wreckage of her soul and helped her polish the shards into something beautiful. A soft affirmation slips out, and the crushing weight in the air finally lifts. As the gold slides home on her finger, they hold each other. A quiet coronation. By September, they are swearing their lives away in a sun-dappled garden, with only Elena and Marcus there to witness their survival. Sarah Chen stands among them, her notebook closed, a survivor among survivors. The crowd is a strange, broken family, refugees from the house, Adrian's scarred men, and Serena's sharp-eyed lawyers. It is a messy, beautiful collision of worlds, unconventional, yet the only truth they know. This is their anthem, written in blood and soil. Serena carries flowers she pulled from the earth herself, her dress a spill of elegant silk. Adrian looks at her as if she is his only salvation. They speak of love like a battle-hardened pact, a promise to be the still point in a turning world. When the words are final, a roar of joy breaks the silence. The title of husband feels like a sweet, heavy weight in her chest. For the first time, her mind is quiet. She has finally wrestled her life from the hands of ghosts and claimed a future that belongs to no one but her. The night glows with warm lights and the low hum of laughter. She dances with her husband, then with Marcus, then with Jackie, the girl who arrived as a shadow and stayed as a sister. She memorizes the taste of this joy. Eventually, she slips back to the balcony, staring at the stars. Above, the constellations burn white-hot against the black. Elena slides into the shadows beside her, 2 glasses in hand. "How does it feel at the top of the mountain?" she asks. "Terrifying," Serena whispers. Elena smiles, a tired, knowing thing. "That's the secret. You did the impossible. We all made it out." Haven House stands behind them, a monument built of Serena's iron will. Elena looks back at the dark, remembering the night Serena's father sold her to the wolves. Life is won in inches. Serena could have been erased. Instead, she chose to harden, meeting the crushing darkness with a light of her own. Out of the flames, she has sculpted something holy. Elena wonders at the strength it takes to turn agony into peace. Most people would have shattered, but Serena stood tall. That is the only bravery that matters. Then Adrian's shadow falls over them. "They're looking for you," he says softly. She smiles. "Let them wait." She leans into him, her center of gravity. The months after the wedding are a brutal, beautiful grind of building. Her vision for the shelter grows into a fortress of healing. She recruits a circle of steel, turning the very systems that failed her into doors for the lost. Finally, she stands before the world, cutting herself open to show the scars underneath. At first it felt like bleeding out, but then the letters started coming. Strangers whispered their thanks after her speeches. In her tragedy, they saw their own reflection, and the lonely cold of their pain began to thaw. This connection is her heartbeat. Meanwhile, Adrian bleeds out his old life, cutting away the rot of his empire. He is planting new seeds in the honest earth. It isn't easy. The echoes of his sins still scream in the quiet hours. but he keeps walking toward the light, and for him, that struggle is everything. Winter arrives with a phone call. Exactly 365 days since the world tilted. Detective Morris's voice is a dry rasp. Gregory Vale is dead. His heart gave out in the gray silence of a cell. Serena sinks into her chair as the oxygen leaves the room. No cheers, just a hollow void. Blood is a heavy chain, even when it's poison, Morris tells her. She did what no one else could. She stared down her monster and won. That is the ultimate test of the soul. Later, in the quiet of her office, she maps out a new map. The man who tried to kill her spirit is finally dust. She searches her chest for a spark of grief or a rush of freedom, but finds only a vast gray sea. When Adrian enters, she is frozen in the half-light. The news hangs like smoke between them. "My father is dead," she says. He grips her hand, his pulse steady. There is no relief, only silence. "There are no songs for burying a monster," he whispers. He died in the cage he built for himself. A fitting end. Still, she mourns the ghost of the father who never was, the man who should have been a shield but became a blade. Adrian holds her, letting the silence be the only prayer. The dam finally breaks. She doesn't cry for Gregory Vale, but for the girl she used to be. She grieves for the stolen years and the childhood spent looking over her shoulder. As the tears dry, the iron band around her chest loosens. The scars stay, but the weight is finally something she can carry. "What do you need?" he asks. "I need to work," she says, checking the clock. He worries she's hiding, but she knows that saving others is the only way to save herself. Every woman who finds peace in this house is a victory over her father. She washes her face. The living are waiting. "Forward is the only way out," she says. Adrian nods, his eyes promising to catch her if she falls. Years pass, and the house becomes a lighthouse for the broken. She tells her story now, not as a victim's plea, but as a general's map for those still fighting their way out of the dark. The world watches her now, her single voice becoming a chorus of thousands. She and Adrian have built a kingdom of peace, not power. Meanwhile, Jackie walks the halls of the shelter, no longer a patient, but a doctor in a white coat, a healer born from the wreckage of her own history. Maria's kitchen smells of bread and second chances. Tanya speaks for the ghosts, and Lisa holds a child named Hope in a house that doesn't break. But the dark is still there. Not everyone makes it. Some souls go back to the fire, and others just fade into the biting winter snow. 5 years have passed, and Serena's throne of light stands as the ultimate victory over the dark. Serena doesn't need a microphone. Her life is a sermon that cannot be silenced or ignored. A girl with shattered eyes begs Serena for a way out of the hell she's living in. Serena promises her a new life, while Adrian watches his queen rule her rightful kingdom. The shadows have folded. Serena remains, an unbreakable legend carved from the stone of history. The work is done, and the two of them finally lean into each other, exhausted and alive. Serena watches the flicker, fearing they'd vanish without that shared, blood-soaked debt. Adrian burns his history, surrendering to the beautiful, tragic discord of now. Trading whispered oaths, the pair dissolves into a heavy, communal shadow. Serena shatters every expectation, standing alone as the goddess of her fate. Haven House mined the dynasty, refining ancestral screams into cold gold. Silence falls. Serena finally claims the absolute weight of her freedom.